The promise of advanced analytics and predictive maintenance is that the data was there all along. We just weren't listening to it. But how true is that really? Can the systems most buildings have today predict what's about to break? In this episode, I'm joined by Justin Carter of ENFRA and Rudy Bohince from Alberio Energy to dig into what predictive maintenance actually means, what data you need to make it work, and whether the OT networks running our buildings can even handle these analytic layers being sold on top of them. I'm Ryan LaFlamme, and this is How to Handshake, Episode 6. Hello, welcome to the episode. Thank you. It's me, Ryan, and sitting in the co-host seat this week is our head of growth, John Atala. Hello, John.
Hello.
Filling in for Ping, who is currently in California. And joining us over here as well is Rudy Bohince from Alberio Energy. I'll just give you a moment to let people know what you do there.
Sure. I appreciate you having me on. At Alberio, I lead our managed services center, which handles our intelligence services and smart building services. So Calm is our alarming platform. We do simple building analytics and some cloud hosting, all on top of our building automation divisions, data center divisions as well.
And I think we have Justin.
Hey.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. We're just jumping into introductions here, Justin. So I will send it right back to you. Justin, please introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Justin Carter. I work for ENFRA. I'm one of their controls technologists. I'm based out of our Fayetteville, Arkansas location.
Perfect. And we're here today to talk about predictive maintenance, preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance. They have a lot of different terms, a lot of different marketing terms. I just want to jump right into it. And I'm going to start off with the first question here. What do we mean by predictive maintenance? How is that different, if it's different at all, from what people are calling proactive maintenance? Because sometimes these can be pretty interchangeable. So I'd love to start with you, Rudy, and then I'll over to you, Justin and John.
Sure. We've heard a lot of them be interchangeable. Some of it's marketing fluff, I'll call it as well. There's a lot of that buzzwordy type stuff out there.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really the big thing is where the actions meet the road, right? So I always look at predictive as using your historical data to predict the future, right? I've had, this many air handlers in my building and 3 of them failed after 5,000 run hours, whatever it may be. So when I get to my next air handler, chances are I'm going to get there. So I want to do maintenance before that happens. A little bit of, I think where I draw the line on the nuances, I'm using history data to predict the future. Mm-hmm. Proactive is more, less using that history data and kind of more on the, like an oil change in your car. I change my oil every 5,000 miles because somebody told me to once, and that's what you do. That's proactive. So, not really based on any data that is constantly changing, but based on kind of runtime and things like that.
Justin, is that along your lines of thought?
Yeah, definitely. To take a little step further, I would say if you were talking about the 2 words, the predictive maintenance would be, I'm a big organization. I've spent $2 million to deploy this predicting algorithm, AI, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not changing my culture though. And it tells me the chill water valve actuator is having an issue, but I'm not calling someone to come fix it. I'm not using my internal staff to fix it. So now you're predictive, but you're not proactive. I think maybe that's a little bit what I've actually seen in the real world. It's a shame to watch some customers or hear someone go up and say, man, we did a program and we just never did anything with it, and I think the proactive part is changing your culture. And the predictive's great, but it's nothing without the proactiveness. So
I love that. I just to expand on that and maybe be a stickler for words. I mean, to me, proactive underlying that is sort of intentions, right? Like I want to be better about how I'm doing the same job that I've been doing for the last, however many years. I want to do it better. Therefore, I'll use the predictive, analytics or the tools that are at my disposal to allow me to do that. But you're absolutely right. Predictive analytics without the proactivity, without wanting to get ahead of things and do better maintenance, run better programs, is pretty useless.
And that's a really great segue into our next question. And I think you mentioned it, is predictive analytics or advanced analytics. Again, vendor marketing, du jour, you'll hear that a lot. What does advanced analytics look like as opposed to, say, regular data and regular traffic? And how is that different from, say, trend graphs or dashboards that operators have been using for years?
So, if we approach a site and they say they have analytics or they feel like they have advanced analytics, and I go on there and it's something, say, put in by the incumbent controls contractor, and it's histories and trends and nice dashboards, and you get a little bit of that. But then if you go to market and you have the actual advanced analytics, community, typically what you're going to see in their products is, this is the issue, this is how much it's costing you, here's a priority list, this one's compliance based, this one's cost based. So say if you have a hospital, it's like, this one may not be costing you money, but your OR is out of compliance, it's above 60% relative humidity, and that's probably what, when you say the word advanced analytics, that's where my head goes.
Right.
But every client's a little different. Class A office building's not going to care about certain things like that. But that's kind of, sometimes I see people say they're doing advanced analytics, and I'm like, oh, that's just a history or trend chart.
And yeah, I think to your point, Justin, the biggest one is what are you doing with that data? You could have all the advanced analytics behind it. I still think that having an operator be able to see what's going on and easily understand it is kind of, what makes it advanced. And all of our jobs kind of on the analytics side, the controls provider side, is to make it as simple as possible to take action on that data. So you could run whatever AI models and, stuff in the background to make it advanced. But if it's not directive for that client, that's, to Justin's point, it's different for hospital versus commercial office building. They're not all the same. So, if you don't have it customized to them and their needs, then you can do whatever you want and it's not going to make a bit of difference. And that's where that changing your workflow kind of becomes really important, that you can take the advanced analytics and have it look at all sorts of different key performance indicators and, metrics there, but boil it down into something simple, something that you can take action on, that you can easily see, whether it's a trend or a dashboard, and then prove that you fix something. And that's really what makes this stuff kind of more advanced, I think.
Right. What are we usually looking for in advanced analytics? As we throw out in the questions here, what kinds of problems are these tools, these advanced analytics, do you feel are really good at catching? And what are the things that they're still missing? This could be your wish list. What are they good at, and where are the problems, or where they still need room for improvement?
Yeah, so, you're catching some simpler stuff for sure in the advanced analytics. You should be catching things like, say, a damper on something goes open and the airflow doesn't go up, or it goes down, and it's like, okay, actuators flipped on polarity, or the PID loops backwards. It did the opposite of what I expected. Some of that simpler stuff, that's been happening, I'm sure, for over a decade. So I've seen some of that works pretty well nowadays. We do some advanced chiller analytics where we have found things that the chiller companies weren't finding, with their techs on site. We're able to look at pressures in the chiller, and does this make sense for that given refrigerant? That's where some of more of the advanced stuff, I feel like, that even sometimes we're not great at it, and we have partners and we all look at the data, and it takes a minute, that part might not be there sometimes. But that's, there definitely is a threshold. I don't know exactly where it is, but simple air side stuff and water side stuff, I think the market's got pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's where you start, comparing equipment performance versus rated performance and published performance. I think where it really gets, I'll call it advanced, is taking all of that data out of a building and comparing them one to another by equipment type. Like Justin said, the equipment running after hours, on holidays, scheduling, damper stuff, that's all been kind of baked for a while in the industry. I think that's kind of your retro commissioning scope, right? Like that, everybody kind of has that part baked down. And then it's a matter of looking at performance versus other typical things of that nature. So I've got 15 pumps in a system. Why is this one pump operating differently than this other pump? And why does that only happen at certain flow rates? That's where I think you're starting to get into some of the more advanced things, but that requires somebody to generally look at it and kind of have an understanding of the building and the history there as well.
Mm-hmm. I was going to throw this at you, John, because it seems to me that everybody is kind of hinting at the idea of what makes things a little bit more advanced is bringing in a larger context around it. Like you said, the situation or in comparison to other performances, real world performances versus stated performances. And I know, John, we have a very different sort of experience from a software side. And I'm just curious what you would, or what, we consider in the hands-on for Optigo VN, the advanced side of our analytics, as opposed to, say, the core.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is that, our analytics are going to be very different from what you might get out of a tool like Wireshark, where it's just kind of all kind of there on a page for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're really talking about going from looking at, hundreds of thousands of packets in a dashboard to getting needle in the haystack type information, at your fingertips. So it's pretty game changing from that, respect. But there are things that it may not do quite as well as you'd like, particularly for MSDP, right? When you get down to the physical kind of, wiring level and electrical signals, that's unfortunately just something that you can't get in the zeros and ones of the packets. So that's the only limitation of the technology today. But, hopefully that's going away with T1L and with, BACnet IP migrations and whatnot.
Predictive models seem to be pretty heavily involved in the obviously predictive and the proactive side of learning, and they need data to learn from. So, when we look at building systems specifically, what types of historical data would you say are from the network and the controllers are actually the useful bits of data that would be for a predictive model? For people at home who may be trying to set these up at their own organizations, how far back should they be holding on or pulling in these sorts of historical data to start building something that will be valuable for looking ahead?
The historical data, and we've had some customers that have had old legacy systems, old legacy servers that have had data for 15 years just because they had it. They didn't really have a use case for it, didn't know what they were going to do with it until later. So I think if you already have data, we're primarily talking about building automation systems, just keep your trends on everything, because you kind of never know. And I think, the other thing is the industry is changing so much that more and more data is becoming available,
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of don't know what you're going to do with some of the data. So you may as well keep it as almost an insurance policy, and that way you can learn from your past as well. Now, that being said, most of the data we deal with is pretty dirty. There's not many naming conventions. I've seen, space temperatures have 5 different names depending on, who decided to program it at that time or what manufacturer it was. So it's all relatively dirty. I don't think you need to spend time to clean up all of that data to make it useful. Take it one step at a time, figure out what you're going to do with it, and then invest your time to clean that data before you try and boil the ocean. Right? Because there's a ton of information out there, and you can get really hung up trying to, do the right data modeling on, this small set of data points that has almost no return on investment. So I think that keep all the data that you can, cost effectively and, everything like that, but then figure out what you want to do with it, then focus on getting that data cleaned up from a data modeling standpoint, and then kind of show the results there and then kind of chip away at it is what we've seen as being successful.
I'm going to spin that as a question to Justin, which is, as it relates to network data specifically, is there any value in historical data whatsoever, or is it more of a what have you done for me lately kind of scenario where, really we just care that the network is in optimal shape today, and what happened yesterday is, maybe a matter of fact to look back on when we need to, but it's not really valuable for, today's operating conditions?
Yeah. So if you're talking about, say, HVAC energy data, consistency is more key than links sometimes. I mean, you do need kind of seasonal. Like if you got summer, winter, and kind of shoulder months, you can do some good analytics. Network's a little different because the networks probably don't change much based on seasonal unless you've got some equipment outside maybe or something. But yeah, network is typically more of, do you got current projects going on? Is someone touching the network? Did you add 18 backnet devices? What is that? Why is it all duplicated? It's definitely two different things. I would say it's probably more of a, what have you done for me lately and what have you been doing recently to your network? Yeah, I wouldn't need a whole lot of data probably from the network to say, the last 3 weeks you've been acting like this and I see all these devices and then all of a sudden something's different. Where HVC data, it can be definitely a different range because there's a lot of different things going on and in that world.
I want to circle back around to something you mentioned, Rudy, about the data being dirty. Dirty data. We hear about that a lot. One of the sort of key things about making an analytics program work is having underlying data that is in good shape, right? We say point names, complete trends, timestamps, all of those things. So yeah, like how much cleaning and tagging does a typical building need before it's sort of ready, perhaps, to be layered on with additional analytics or advanced predictive software? And for people again who are probably organizing either at an SI or at a facilities team, where would that usually fall in the organization? To who gets the ticket, I suppose, is the question.
From what I've seen, I kind of sit in managed services. We do both the analytics side, but we also do a lot of the BAS support too, right? So we kind of get both ends of that spectrum where sometimes we're the SI and we're going in and doing some of this tagging, and then otherwise we're the data analytics guy. We've always approached it from the data analytics side, is that we're going to clean the data within our analytics platform, because we kind of know that what happens in the facilities isn't going to change. They still want their zone temp to be called zone temp, whether we want it space temp, it doesn't matter, because they need to use it on a daily basis. So we always found it more economical to do it in our analytics platform, because that's where we have more control, and that's the least impactful to the building operators and the facilities team that's using it. That being said, I mean, it's it can be quite a lot. We try and tag by equipment type and data type and everything like that, and go through and do a standard there. But we do also focus on, what are we looking at? What are we trying to get out of this program? And then we have a couple of, internal commissioning things that we look at for data integrity. So, I've got a VAV box. I'm expecting 15 points out of it. How many do I actually have? How many fit this, ontology spec from, a tagging model? And then how many history points do I have? Is that what I'm expecting to have? Do I have big gaps in data? Do I have sensors that aren't changing? And that's kind of the other problem, is you've got operators involved, right? So they go in and do a maintenance, they have a hot and cold call, and they're overriding something. And sometimes those overrides stay, and then sometimes they remember to remove those overrides when that event is over. So from trying to make a regular trend curve of, this is what I expected it to look like, but all of a sudden I flatlined for 3 days, like, that makes it real tough to do any sort of historical analytics or plug it into an AI engine or anything like that. So we try and look at all that stuff as part of like a data integrity effort when we onboard a project and go through, and then we try and factor that into the analytics rules.
And Rudy, you just touched on something that was interesting, which with regard to data integrity and ontology, and what we found a lot at Optigo is that there's very much that sort of focus from the SI, from the building owner, for whoever is deploying these technologies. But we always like to kind of relate that back to the network comms issues that we see. So, for example, if you had a building automation technician that mistakenly was having a bad day or was forgetful and programmed the same backnet device instance ID into 2 VAV controllers, and now you're pulling that data into your into your software or whatever, it's probably pulling the wrong data half the time. And now those systems are making certain assumptions or running different, FDD rules or whatever the case may be. on completely flawed data to begin with. So I think it just kind of, serves as a good reminder for folks who are deploying these types of products that you don't want to have one without the other. You really want to have, proper network performance and device addressing and all that kind of core stuff before or at the same time as you're deploying these FDD tools, because otherwise, who knows whether you're operating under good assumptions to begin with, right?
Yeah.
I know when we're recording these podcasts, if I'm not careful to give everything a proper name, when it a few weeks down the road, if I need to come back and make edits, if everything is called take one, then it's sort of the same thing. And Justin, I saw you nodding your head through that. I'm assuming this is a shared experience for you on your end as well.
Yeah, so we call the offering like monitoring based commissioning, and we have a team that does like the data part. And so there's kind of I'm thinking maybe 3 verticalities here. One is I got a connection and it's stable, and that means no duplicate backnet IDs, blah blah blah, right? Second team comes in and kind of does that tagging, and so like you can use Haystack or whatever, and the product we use that. And then the last team, the one that actually gets to have the fun and do the analytics, the prerequisites for them to even see it in that product that we use, it's got to have a stable connection first. So we're using Optigo to make sure the backnet scores are good and other things before we even give it to the site build team. And then if the site's not built right and you haven't really checked, like Air Handler 2 serves these 15 VAVs. If that's not done, it doesn't make it to the team that's trying to do the analytics, get an issues log in front of an owner. And so I don't think I'm giving away any secrets there. That this is what the analytics world has to deal with. And if you're not at least doing those kind of 3 verticalities that I'm laying out, you're having a tough time for sure.
There you go. There's some, I hope everyone wrote down those 3 tips.
Well, and you're exactly right. Kind of understanding your network is the first step. We've used the visual backnet in the past too, and we won't touch a job until it gets to a certain score, because otherwise you can't trust anything, and then you're throwing good money at bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've gone into analytics customers and they say, I know I have a hole in the wall. I don't need to pay you to tell me that. It's like, no, you don't. So fix your foundation, and then you can really do the fun stuff with it. So Justin's entirely right.
Stop me if it sounds wrong, but coming from a previous role on the other side in the IT world, one of the things you hear a lot about, especially in the last few years, is edge analytics, right? The idea of doing the data crunching out where the data is coming in, rather than trying to shovel it all into one central computer to try and figure that out. And you don't hear about it a lot in OT networking and smart building. At least I haven't to this point. And it's probably not surprising, that a lot of the OT networks that we deal with are running a lot of older or low powered, hardware that really may not have the horsepower for any meaningful compute at the edge. From your own experiences being out in the field, how real is that constraint? And, what does a path forward look like to perhaps start bringing in, the efficiencies that edge compute can do? Is it a rip and replace? Is it piecemeal? Is it gradual upgrades? Or is it just pushing the analytics somewhere else entirely? So go ahead, Rudy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of analytics on the edge yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think the closest we get is still at the supervisory level within a building. We will do it up in the cloud as well, but we're not seeing analytics on a chiller or a VAV box, or any of those controllers. Where we are seeing the edge, I guess, is trends. Rather than always looking at the backnet curve value, we are sometimes looking at the trend value, because then we get that trend collection on the edge. So if we lose a network connection or IT shuts down a port or something like that, you still have that data collecting at the edge. And then when that connection is reestablished, it transfers up to the supervisor, to the analytics engine there. So we'll do localized trends there. We'll do extended trending or long-term trends, either in the supervisor or in a SQL database, and then we'll pull those into the analytics engine. I think in the future, You'll start seeing more and more compute power at the edge. And I think you'll see different OEMs, whether it's a chiller manufacturer or air handlers, VRF, whatever, they're going to start packaging their analytics locally there. And then I think the whole role of an analytics provider changes to, if they know their chillers best, let them analyze that.
Right.
We can factor that in, and then we can apply what they're finding to the rest of the building, because it's all kind of cascades down too. So I think that's kind of where the edge analytics ties into your supervisor, and then you got to have somebody make sense of it all.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have much experience with analytics at the edge. Of course, everything that we get is captured from somewhere on the network. But I think Rudy gave a really excellent answer. It's interesting where this is going to go. I will say that it's maybe semi-related. I was at the Niagara conference a couple months ago and was speaking to a gentleman who was talking about, network performance and, a need to monitor network performance or do anything about it. And I recall asking him, hey, as it relates to Optigo anyway, why would you, not want to investigate or look at a tool like this for your company? And the answer that I got back was pretty surprising. It was something to the effect of, well, we only use IP networks now. We only build out IP networks. So we're not using MSTP anymore. So we wouldn't have any of the slowness. We wouldn't have any of the, bottlenecks or problems that your product, can help us fix or whatever. And I thought that was, I hope that's not indicative of the larger industry as far as how they're thinking about this stuff, because BACnet IP does not mean lack of broadcast or lack of congestion in a network. It just means that it can go faster and hit harder when it does happen. So I thought that was an interesting anecdote from folks out there who are thinking about, networking and edge and all that stuff.
I think as you add more analytics and people are using the data more, they're trying to get building automation data, electrical meter data into the rest of their building platforms and Power BIs and Grafana. I think networking performance is going to become more important, because you're going to have more systems and more people getting into this data. And a lot of what we've seen has been either a serial connection into the building automation system or BACnet polling. And whether it's IP or MSTP, that'll slow everything down. So, I think that as analytics change, as it goes to the edge and back up, like different ways to connect, we've got to catch up with the rest of the IT world. And network performance is going to become more critical, because you layer on these things and it starts to bog things down. Building operators aren't going to understand why. They're just going to get, graphics that spin and spin and spin, and data that's old and stale because it can't update. So that's where your network performance, becomes even more important, not less.
As the OT IT convergence continues, OT is being dragged into the larger IT world, and comes with that is all of that extra overhead, that much more data, that much more bandwidth needs. And I think it was in our last interview who said simply easier these days to just say, if it's on the network, it's all IT. And we need to start sort of looking at it like that and start raising the expectations of the OT network's performance to that of IT if we're going to expect preventative maintenance, predictive analytics, all of these advanced algorithms running. All of that comes with a cost, right?
I know we've restructured my team to, as part of our managed services center, that we recognize we've got system integrators across the country. We're dealing more and more with IT teams, and we don't generally speak that language. So we've taken the approach of, we've hired IT people, brought them up to speed on BACnet, Modbus, and OT networks. And now we do, a lot of heavy network stuff through my team because of that type of, interconnection there. So
have you noticed that too, Justin, that there's simply more and more of the IT world creeping in?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. So apologies. IT issue, right? Today I'm sitting here joining on the phone because my IT is very secure. So apologies. I got
well, you have your test port You've got your test lab behind you, your OT test lab behind you, and we're
Yeah.
troubleshooting IT issues right now.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So yeah, no, we the data delivery team that I've been working with that does that connection, when we sign the big contracts, or say if the big energy as a service type of contract, and we get in front of some IT department, or even if it's just a quick retro commissioning, little monitor based commissioning, we actually just got a guy that joined the team. I think he's been doing IT stuff for 20 or 30 years. So for the last year, some of my conversations are, what is BACnet? How do you, what is this and what is that? And when I bring it into certain IT terms where, like if instead of saying trends, you say the word logs, and, it's like, oh, the discovery that we're talking about is this type of TCP kind of like thing going on, something similar to it, and you use a little bit of terminology, all of a sudden, like, oh, that's all it is. It's a broadcast message instead of unicast. And it's like, yeah. And so all of a sudden I've seen just bringing in him, our IT security reviews have gone so much faster. And I'll tell you, yeah, if you at least have one or two on your team that can get past the acronym and terminology, hell that we live in, it's just necessary at this point. I'm seeing as well the industry move to IP-based controls, right? And so you want to do analytics on the edge, or you want to do more at the edge, not just analytics, but maybe more trending, more this, more that. But like the IT OT conversion is definitely something to keep an eye on. And if your teams don't have someone that can speak a little bit of IT and convert BAS kind of acronym and terminology to the IT world, you will have a lot of issues. And so, yeah, Rudy, you probably experienced the same thing I did. You get those IT OT kind of people in there, and they're lost for a second, and then once they hit the ground running, they're like, oh man, it's not that. It's not that confusing. It's just BACnet is a protocol you got to deal with, and Modbus is a protocol you got to deal with sometimes, and LAN is still out there a little bit, and it's like don't. It's not scary. Like it's just once you do it a few times, it's really not that.
We had Douglas Plumley from Dartmouth College on, and I asked him, how have you been able to sort of bridge the gap between IT and OT? And his answer was pizza parties. He said it was just get people in a room, give them some food, and let them talk. And really it was like getting over that initial nomenclature hump, and it was like, turns out there's a lot more in common than there is different. And speaking of, seeing more and more advanced things, we do have to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in every room, AI and machine learning. So software that learns patterns from data rather than following just the rules you set out is a pretty big shift, I would think, in the world of OT, where everything has been for so long very schedule based, very simple sort of if-then statements. But looking specifically at, say, anomaly detection for BACnet IP, how feasible is the idea of AI running the show? Not just being somebody you ask for advice, but actually turning over the idea, which, I mean, that is the marketing, terms that people would love. The end is, set it and forget it. How feasible is actually something like that? What barriers do you think might be in the way? Is it even, or is this just like a straight up pipe dream?
Should we pause for the groans of our audience, our viewers who are just, oh no, not another AI question?
We'll give them a second to, like, they've now closed the podcast. We'll give them a second to load it back up and give us a second chance. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back. We are with you. Let's continue.
I think it's a requirement. It's a box you have to check when you do a type of podcast like this, where you have to mention AI.
Yes.
Otherwise, you don't get through the AI filters to get bumped to the top.
Exactly. I acknowledge I will be listening to a conversation about AI at some point in this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing an article maybe about 3 weeks ago where one of the AI LMs was like, the way it solved some problem that kept getting asked was it finally just deleted the database. And it's like that, I think that kind of answers it for me. It's like you still need the human component. And when the human component is involved, and before you do, like, say, global commanding, most automation systems have global commanding, the human still needs to click the button that sends the zone temperature set point to 68 on every VAV box in the whole hospital. And so that's some of it's almost like you got to firewall certain areas off. And I think that's kind of my answer, is that if someone really expects it to fully automate and there's no human component, you probably need to step away for the next 3, 5, 10 years and come back.
Yeah, no Skynet. No Skynet
No.
is what we're saying
No.
here.
Not as of today.
No, I mean, in some cases, we're still trying to get operators to trust just the regular control system and the schedules. So, depending on where you're at, I still deal with operators that want to go out and feel the wind and then set their chilled water temperature for the day. So, I think it's baby steps there. And then the other part is, where's if you have an issue or you have a hot and cold call, where's this kind of decision-making tree happening? I think that we're not comfortable there yet from an operation standpoint, where, it's a couple of years out for sure.
Yeah, and I think on the BACnet or network diagnostics piece, obviously AI is going to be an important component going forward, but I think it can lack sometimes like operational context, right? What I mean by that is, example, if we're looking at a campus environment and we're looking at devices that are offline, for example, the tool may flag that as an anomaly or as a problem to be addressed. Whereas, maybe it's just, it's wintertime, so the chiller has been turned off or whatever. I mean, that's a simple context that AI could certainly learn, but it's that type of thing, the operational context that's maybe missing from some of this, what AI is doing. And I think it can be improved on, but it's probably going to take a couple more years before it's fully there.
And that's a little bit of what I was talking about with that data integrity too, is like, you don't have normal curves that operate the way you think they should. You might have a sensor that shorts and then all of a sudden you've got a 327 degrees and then it goes back down, or, a meter resets or something. Like, it's not clean historical data most oftentimes. So, we're starting to use it, but it's in choice areas. It's usually behind the scenes and support mechanisms.
It's interesting because to hear some people talk, it's almost past what you just said, Rudy, where it was like, take my historical data and tell me where it should be. It's take the historical data. I'll see you later. Send me a report at the end of the month. And right. It's kind of that gulf between, the marketing speak and the idea of what we want it to be versus, like you said, the reality. Like a fuse could go and all of a sudden it's making the worst kind of decisions. I'm going to move into our second last question here, because we are obviously a software vendor company. We pay attention to a lot of the things we do, but we don't always get to see what everybody else is out there offering to people on your side. And what we do know is there are a lot of vendors out there, analytics startups, fault detection, things like that. And people, and we've been lucky enough to have a few on the show. And then there's also, incumbent BMS providers that are really bolting these sort of what they call their advanced analytics and predictive analytics modules onto their products. I guess the question here is, what's actually delivering value in the market today versus what's sort of mostly marketing? What are the ones that are kind of making you roll your eyes when vendors are contacting you these days? And what should a building owner sort of do to cut through that? What should they really be zeroing in when somebody's talking about our advanced analytics?
I mean, probably some red flags to me are if you're getting shown something and it's only dashboards, and they're not mentioning at all some of these things about, like we talked about, like actually connecting to your existing systems, maybe talking about architecture. Hey, what you got? They're not, the sales guy's not feeling you out on those kind of things, and they're just showing you the pretty dashboards. But if they're showing you things like that, and they're showing you point A to point B to point C to point D, and they're not really hiding much, and they're, not sitting behind a pretty GUI, I think you're on to something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what Justin hit on too is kind of where I was going. Is before you're even evaluating something, you've got to look internally and figure out how you're going to work it into your workflow.
Right.
And that's kind of the A to B to C to D that Justin mentioned. Is if you don't have somebody that's going to be using it and kind of owning the results of it, then you could buy whatever system out there, and it could be really flashy and cool. You're going to get a lot of reports. You'll get some nice dashboards, but you won't make any progress on it because you don't have anybody to own it.
Right.
So I think, before you really go out and look at any of the systems out there, because there's a lot of really good ones, there are a lot of fluff out there, but you've got to figure out how you're going to use it or who's going to use it. And if it's not, if you don't have a dedicated person that it's going to be their job, then it's probably something when you evaluate the technology, you want to evaluate the support system and kind of the consulting agreement that goes along with it. And I totally agree with Justin that it's something you need to tie to some sort of work orders, but you want to be able to tie, I found this, I assigned it to, you, or I assigned it to building tech, and then they fixed it, and this was the result, rather than I got this really cool thing and it's got AI and I can talk to it and everything else, but I don't actually make any changes.
I really like that piece of advice that both of you hit on there is figure out exactly like you said, figure out your use case. And I would maybe add, don't be afraid to ask them to answer it, right? Say, this is what I need. Can it do it? Rather than, letting them just go through their whole demo spiel and, like you said, show the pretty graphics. It's like, can it do A, B, and C for me in my situation? So yeah, those are really good pieces of advice for sure. And with that, I think we'll hit up our last question here.
Hey Ryan, I'm gonna
Yes,
go
sir.
off. I'm gonna go off the board for one question if I can. A little surprise.
Yes, you can.
For
yes,
these
you
guys.
can. Spicy questions and spicy answers are encouraged.
I love it. Okay, so here's something that I've heard before in the context of Optigo's solution, and I wonder if it resonates for you guys and how you address that in the market, which is FDD or analytics or anything that is finding problems and allowing the building owner or their service provider to fix those issues. Are there value in these tools beyond, let's say, the initial 1-year deployment? Or are we finding everything in that first year and then, selling them those pretty reports years 2 and onward? I'm just curious to get your guys' feedback.
For our certain type of projects, say we have an energy as a service agreement that's 20 or 30 years, absolutely. We keep it in there, kind of as an insurance policy almost. And I can tell you, we've got one project that's maybe on a year 7, year 8. And in about year 4 of it, maybe year 5, some big BAS upgrade happened and broadcast storm, this or that. It's your fault detection product. Nope.
Mm-hmm.
It's this right here. Optigo shows where it started, where it's going. It's coming from the BAS server. I'm not going to pick on the vendor, but it's a vendor we see a lot that likes to do, is real chatty with BACnet, and they know about it. And the conversation went real fast to its ENFRA's fault detection platform to, oh, it happened on March 15th right at 2 p.m. And the guy had just come back from lunch, and it installed another panel. And it's just like, yep, there you go. Like, I can tell you the minute it happened. And after that happened, I got a lot of buy-in internally, let's just say, to make sure this, some type of product watching BACnet analytics stayed and was installed on new projects. So that's our experience with it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, buildings are not static things, right? They're always changing. Somebody's always plugging something in. They're doing tenant fit outs. They're doing upgrades, and that causes changes everywhere, whether it's on the controllers, it's on the network. Something's always changing. And I think that, sure, you may have found a lot of stuff the first year, but that doesn't mean it's not changing year 2, year 3, year 4. It's a little bit of, your insurance policy, your continuous commissioning agent, your network analyst, kind of all boiled into one, and trying to make it easy to find that type of stuff. So I think there is ongoing, value to all of it.
I love that. And I'm glad you guys mentioned those stories because I'm a greedy salesperson, right? So I'm clearly biased in this conversation, but I think you're right for what it's worth. I think there are obviously things that happen in the building, in year 2 and beyond, that if you're not using an FDD platform or a network analytics platform, you've missed those things. And depending on how severe those issues become, the building owner will pay for them one way or another. If it's not for the, the FDD product that's lumped into their service agreement, it's going to be for all the time and material along the way that gets them the fix, right? So I thought that was interesting.
Because John, we've had, I know you've related stories where we've had conversations with people that have used, say, like Optigo VN, and they're like, oh, it was great, it fixed all our problems, I'm good, I'm good now, thanks, bye.
Yeah, I mean, in general, you're sort of talking to, I think, an antiquated way that some some people operate in our industry. But it's conversations like these really, I think, that are starting to turn the tide on that. There's a beginning, let's say, of an understanding within our market that some level of continuous monitoring on the network side and of the performance of the building automation system beyond just what's built into the the BMS itself are valuable and providing value to the customer, or if not to the customer directly, then the service provider is gleaning value from it. We know of a particular service provider who has a unique, I guess, business model where their service delivery is essentially a fixed fee annually, and they don't get paid any additional time and material if they have to come outside of whatever bank of hours they've contracted or agreed to. So you can imagine in a scenario like that, having products like these that we're talking about are pretty darn valuable.
Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect segue to the final question here. It's easy to talk when you have a large company or large budgets where you have money to burn on these things, but let's just say you're somebody running a mid-sized portfolio, something like that, typical mix, HVAC, lighting, access control, and they're thinking about whether or not it's time to jump into the extra investment in these analytics software solutions. Would you say now is a good time to start? Wait a few years? Stay with your current approach? Where do you feel like this technology is earning its keep today, and where do you think maybe staying with what you have right now is probably better?
It depends on the amount of risk, electricity's probably not going down. Electricity rates, natural gas rates probably aren't going down. And it's all about your risk tolerance, and then how much capital do you really have? I mean, if you just don't have the capital, I've heard this when I started in the industry. Like sometimes people can't afford to have a building automation system. And really what the guy meant at the time was, well, if you're not going to install it right, and you're not going to choose a good vendor, and you're going to go low bid, and you're not going to take care of the sensors once they get 5-10 years old and recalibrate, maybe you can't afford that system. And I would say the same thing for fault detection. There's probably a point of entry, and if you're going low bid on everything and the sales guy's showing you pretty GUIs, right? And he's not asking you good questions about how does this fit into your culture? Can I integrate to your work order system? And there's probably a lot of companies out there that can help consult and, firms that know the fault detection world stuff and tell you, yeah, you do have the capital for this, or no, you don't.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do have to do a little bit of self-reflection. Like I said, my example was we had a customer that was like, I know my dampers are falling off the wall. I can't do anything about it right now. That's probably not worth the investment in fault detection.
Right.
But the other part
Tell
is
you what you already know.
You've got exactly, and you're not doing anything about now anyway. So like that's where you wait a few years, but you've got to kind of get your house in order first. And sometimes that's hard to kind of look internally and recognize that. But then you've got to change the culture and get into that kind of maintenance mentality before it's worth investing in something like this.
It's almost like, can you afford to fix the problems it finds?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And then the other part is it this allows you to do more with less. You've got, we kind of are in a gap a little bit in the industry where you've got a lot of really experienced people and then a lot of really young people coming into the industry, and there's not a whole lot in between. So depending on where you're at with your mix of staff and size of portfolio, this could be a good way to help bridge that gap or get some of those early entrants to the career up to speed a lot quicker by giving them better information. I think that kind of depends on where your staffing is and how big you are and some of those types of things.
Yeah, and Justin talked about risk and all that cost, of course. And I think that, those two things need to be factored in heavily. But the other thing to consider is that, if you're a building owner who's happy to get a bill for, however many hours of work for your systems integrator, and it's opaque as far as what that work was and what was done, keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like that, you're probably good with that. If you want to actually get some insight into, what's wrong with the building, the sensors, the controllers, how actually your, energy bills could go down, how you can improve the speed of your building automation system. If you actually want to start getting some of those insights and visibility rather than just, relying and paying the bill that is opaque each month or each year, FDD is and analytics in general are a good time to get in. You're going to have that visibility, and visibility breeds accountability is the other thing, right? If you don't have access to these tools, you're not getting some of this reporting. You really don't know what's going on. You're trusting whoever is doing the work in your building. To be honest with you, when you have access to those tools, now you've got a level of collaboration with your vendors and a level of visibility and transparency that breeds better work and better outcomes for the building. So those are things to keep in mind as well.
And I think that is a perfect place, gentlemen, to end this discussion. Justin and Rudy, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Nice
Thanks.
to meet you, Rudy.
Thanks.
Yeah, you too, Justin. Take care, guys.
How to Handshake was created by Optigo Networks. You can find us on YouTube and at optigo.net. Tune in 2 weeks for the next episode.